And thank you so much for being here. My name is Scott Epstein. I'm the Director of Policy and Research with Abundant Housing LA. I've been in this role for 3 years. I manage both our local policy and our state policy work, as well as our small but growing research portfolio. Abundant Housing LA has been active in Sacramento for a number of years now. And last year was our biggest year in Sacramento yet, and we're keeping up that momentum. So we're really excited to share our slate of 4 bills with you today. And we're excited also to have Nolan from California YIMBY here to talk about some of our partner organizations' key bills this year as well. So I will hit it off, and we're going to leave plenty of time for questions as well. Excited to engage with you all. Let me share my screen. Let's see if that's working. No. Okay, can everyone see that? Okay, I'm going to take that as a yes.
Yes.
Okay.
I just see a black screen. I don't know about everybody else.
Yeah, Sam, it says you start. Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go.
I'm trying to go to. This always trips me up a little bit, but can everyone still see that, or is it weird for you?
You got it now.
We can see it.
Looks good.
Thank you, Scott.
Okay, great. Okay, so this year we are sponsoring 4 bills, and it's a pretty diverse package that hits on many of the different domains that are important for unlocking housing abundance and equity. So there are bills on permitting reform and streamlining, on that bills that cover some zoning reform and home ownership, also building code, which is increasingly an important part of pro-housing advocacy work. And combined, these bills would help us build a lot more housing, along with, of course, so many other state legislative efforts, more quickly in high-resource infill locations. So 3 of these bills are brand new, and one of them is not. So in Sacramento, there are 2-year legislative sessions, and some bills that you submit in the first year make it out in that year and are signed by the governor. And sometimes you need to take a little bit of a pause because you might be having some challenges in a particular committee, and it may make sense to turn your bill into what's called a 2-year bill and retake up the fight next year. So AB 1294, which is authored by Assembly Housing Chair Matt Haney of San Francisco, is one of those 2-year bills. We sponsored the bill last year and got through a good deal of the legislature, got through 3 different policy committees. And then we were a little bit stuck in one committee with some concerns there. So we decided, you know what, let's take a pause. And we'll regroup in 2026 and get this bill across the finishing line. The bill is part of a major housing package from last year called the Fast Track Housing Package. That was a package of bills championed by one of our greatest leaders on the Assembly side, Assemblymember Wicks, and came out of her special select committee on that topic. Most of those bills passed last year. This is one of the few that is a 2-year bill. And it's focused on the very beginning of a project, on the application stage. And it would make a more uniform process. What we've seen is that some jurisdictions gum up the works very early in the process by asking for a lot of things at the initial application stage when they are not necessary. You can imagine things like noise studies or extensive outreach efforts. And so this bill uniforms that, makes that process more uniform by only allowing certain types of documentation that early in the process. We're really excited that our friends at California YIMBY have come on as co-sponsors this year. So we have an even more robust team, and we're looking to get this across the finishing line. The second bill in our package is around the California Coastal Act. So this is AB 1740, authored by Assemblymember Zbur. We are working with the city of Santa Monica and our friends at Streets for All as a co-sponsor team. And as some of you know, the California Coastal Act is a key environmental law passed in the 1970s, does a lot of good things, protects access to the coast, makes sure that millionaires can't block your way to getting to the beach. But it is also, unfortunately, similar to CEQA, been weaponized against things we need, like infill housing and urbanized existing coastal communities. So this bill is very exciting. What it would do is it would allow cities to certify themselves as what we're calling urban multimodal communities. To do that, they need certain policies in place. They need a certain amount of high quality transit. They need a certain amount of existing bicycle infrastructure, and they need climate plans. And if they do so, if they have those qualifications and they certify themselves, then they have the right to issue their own permits in the coastal zone for a series of project types that are beneficial for communities and the environment. So that would include things like safe streets redesigns, bike lanes, bus lanes, outdoor dining, and very important for us is housing multifamily housing that is compliant with local zoning or is a result of important state tools like SB 79 or other state tools that override local zoning. So we're really excited about that work, and this one is heading to its first committees very shortly, to natural resources next week, and then to housing the week after. So our next bill is AB 2252. So this is a bill to help unlock the potential of single-stair buildings across the state. So for those of you that have been, you may be aware that this is a big hot topic across the country and certainly in California. Recently, Culver City was the first jurisdiction in the state to adopt a local building code amendment to allow single-stair buildings up to 6 stories tall. It's very exciting. These are buildings that you see all around the world that are safe, but currently not legal. And it's really a key for both affordability and livability. It opens up small urban parcels where it can be difficult to fit housing while complying with a dual stairway requirement. It also opens up the opportunity for more spacious apartments in an urban environment with light and sun on multiple sides. So we're really excited for this bill from a housing abundance perspective, but also from a livability and urbanism perspective. The bill would move us towards statewide standards for 6-story single-stair buildings, and also allow local jurisdictions to go it on their own ahead of the state, as Culver City did. Unfortunately, right now we have a local building code. We have a building code freeze, which was part of the housing trailer bill last year. In many ways, that's a positive thing because building code has become more and more restrictive and more expensive for housing over time. But building code reform is also the next wave of pro-housing reform, and many building code changes, including single-stair, can actually reduce cost. And so we want to make sure that cities that have an appetite for building these kind of typologies can do so. And then finally, to complete our package, we're really excited to be working with California YIMBY again and Unidos US on SB 1116. So this is starter homes for the Starter Home Revitalization Act 3.0. So some of you may be familiar with SB 684 and SB 1123. These are all bills authored by Senator Ana Caballero, geared towards allowing by rights housing typologies for home ownership that are the new version of the starter home, right? It used to be in California, you could buy a modest style house and start to build equity and have some stability in your community. That is more and more difficult, particularly in our higher cost areas where it's just completely not a reality for many folks. And we know that that single family detached homes are no longer affordable in places like Los Angeles. And so this bill allows other typologies like townhomes by right in many more locations. That's what the Starter Home Revitalization Act did. And this third go at it makes some key reforms that will make this this key state tool easier to use in more places. Things like making it easier to build these projects in single family zones, making the objective standards more flexible to allow the kinds of typologies that work as starter homes now, not allowing CC&Rs or like AHLAs from prohibiting these types of typologies if they've been around for a long time. So really excited about that. And I'm sure my friend Nolan may have more to add later. That concludes my short presentation on our bill package. Can everyone still hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Did we lose Nolan?
Did we lose Nolan? Good question. If we did, we could take questions on Abundant Housing LA's slate of bills first, and then move to Nolan.
Well, I will say that Nolan has just joined us
there
again.
he is.
But I will say that also there are lots of things in the chat that we should address at some point, particularly about single-stair, because there are folks concerned about safety. These are all things that we have researched, so we should definitely talk to them about that. And just want to say again that yes, this is being recorded, and I will send this to everyone within 48 hours of the end of the event.
Sounds good, Joshua. Should we go to Nolan first, and then we can go to all the questions?
Yeah, let's do that. Nolan, if you're here and ready, it's your turn.
I'm here. Sorry about that, guys. Apple decided now would be a great time to do an update, and so we love that, don't we? But it's great to be here. we're so lucky to have local partners like Abundant Housing LA, who are holding down the fort down in SoCal. As many of you know, I'm with California YIMBY. We're at the state level pro-housing organization. So we're up here in Sacramento focused on state legislation. So we're running a few more bills than Abundant Housing LA, for whom this is a side project. So I'm not going to use slides today. I'll just talk. So if you want to go take a walk or wash some dishes or whatever else, here we go. So our main policy buckets this year, there's 4. So the first is we're really trying to focus on this homeownership piece. We've made a lot of progress on legalizing rentals and especially deed restricted affordable rentals. And I think there's a growing appetite in the building to try to remove barriers to homeownership. The second piece is feasibility. So, I think as a lot of people are aware, we've made some progress in removing zoning barriers to housing. We've streamlined the permitting process for many projects, but projects still are not penciling, right? And this is partly for factors outside of California's control, Trump's tariffs, deportation of construction labor, macroeconomic chaos. But there are a lot of things that local governments and state government do control. And so we're trying to make some progress on that. The third is focus on downtown districts, so helping some of our struggling downtowns get more investment. And then finally, it's just a global, continuing to refine and reiterate over some of the laws we've worked on in previous sessions. So I'll work on them generally in that order. By the way, I'll go ahead and share this link in the chat. If you want to follow along with the visual aid, I'll be working through these bills. And we've got, in each case, you can find the bill language, you can find a fact sheet, you can find a sample support letter that you or your organization could submit if you're sufficiently motivated. But so let's get into it. So one of the main bills that we're working on this year is AB 1903, which is trying to better balance construction defect law. So of course, we all agree we need strong consumer protections to make sure that consumers are made whole in cases where there's defects with construction. But as most of you also know, in California, those laws are not very well balanced. They don't actually give good faith builders the opportunity to go in and make repairs. They encourage lots and lots of litigation. And so as a result, the construction of condos is essentially ended in California. And a 2 or 3 bedroom condo, that's the starter home in 2026 that our state needs more of. So we're working with someone like Buffy Wicks, state pro-housing superstar, on getting the balance right. And we're working on that with the California Building Industry Association. We have 2 condo bills. The other condo bill that we're working on is AB 1406. So this is our new home deposit reform. So another thing that's gone wrong in California with respect to condos is that, unlike in other states or in other provinces or other countries, it's very difficult to use pre-sale revenue to finance projects. So in most of the rest of the world, one of the main ways that you will finance a condo project is you'll pre-sale the units, that money will be put in a bank account and escrow, and then as progress toward construction is made, some of that money is released, and you can use that as a cheap source of financing for projects as opposed to needing to go to a bank and get a construction loan. So in California, we're very, very, very restrictive on that. It's very hard to actually do that type of financing. And so as a result, we don't actually get, again, a lot of condos. So working with some of them are Chris Ward on that as well, and that's AB 1406. Moving to the second bucket here, or to the reducing costs piece here, we've got a few bills on this. One more piece on starter homes or homeownership. We're also working again with Senator Caballero on further refining the Starter Home Revitalization Act. So many of you probably know this as SB 684. There was SB 1123, lots of numbers. You don't need to worry about them if this is all new. But the Starter Home Revitalization Act streamlines the process of building townhouses and small lot subdivisions. Again, a starter home typology that's affordable to the median family. And so SB 1116 makes a whole bunch of improvements on that framework. And these are all, in every single case, these are things that have been raised with us from local planners who are implementing or local builders who are trying to use the law. So we're really excited about that. That bill actually passed out of the Senate Housing Committee 2 days ago. Okay, now actually moving forward with costs. So there are a few things that we're doing. We're trying to make progress on costs. We are working on SB 1117 with Senator Cervantes, and that will remove the cliff. So to set the table a little bit, part of why ADUs have been such a big success in California is that up to 750 square feet, they're exempt from a variety of fees. But when you hit that 750 square foot cliff, if you build an ADU that's 751 square feet, boom, you're potentially on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars in fees. And so this, of course, disincentivizes 2 or 3 bedroom ADU units that might be well suited to a family. And that's especially important as laws like AB 1033 allow you to condoize and separately convey ADUs, essentially making them, again, another starter home typology. So what SB 1117 will do, it will make fees above the cliff marginal. So there won't be this dramatic cliff that heavily disincentivizes larger family-sized ADUs, and instead there will be a marginal ramp up in the fees. So really large ADUs will still, all ADUs will pay their fair share, but the cliff will not immediately kick in. You'll have a more steady flow of fees, and that's really, really important. Another bill on improving feasibility and reducing cost is SB 1014 with Senator Grayson, who's done a lot of great work on trying to fix impact fees. Of course, California has some of the highest impact fees in the country, and that's a broader challenge. That's a challenge that's rooted in Prop 13 and the inability of cities to just collect revenue through property taxes like in any other state. But in any case, merely capping them is tricky. But one of the things we can do short of that is just add more predictability. So if you've ever tried to build in California, you've probably encountered this, that late in the process, unexpected mandates or unexpected fees are imposed on projects. And so what SB 1014 does is, I think, extremely reasonable, a very small step in the right direction. It would require local jurisdictions and special districts to make a good faith effort upon receipt of a complete application to estimate, hey, here's all the fees and all the mandates that we're going to ask of you. You're not going to find out when you go in to get your final map approved for a small lot subdivision that, oh, now I have to move a utility pole that can add $20,000, $30,000 to the cost of a project. So triple check here, make sure I'm not missing anything else. Two other pieces on cost. So again, small steps in the right direction. We're also working with Abundant Housing LA on AB 1294 with a symbol number Haney, and that will establish standardized application materials across the state. So a standardized form. Again, this is like common sense reform that I think will make it easier for especially small builders who don't have an attorney and don't have staff planners to do the same sorts of projects over and over again. And then last in this bucket is AB 1070 with Assemblyman Ward again. This is we're trying to move the ball forward on increasing the residential code threshold. So this is kind of a complicated policy area, but the 10,000 foot view here is if you're building 1 or 2 units, you're subject to the residential code, which is much more straightforward, far fewer mandates. If you go above that, you automatically trigger the business code, the commercial code. So the building code gets much more complex. And if you ask anybody who tries to build missing middle, this cliff is really, really, really tough for projects in the 3 to 10 unit range to navigate, because a whole bunch of different building code mandates come in without necessarily any clear connection to health or safety improvements. So as many of you know, the legislature moved to freeze the building code last year through 2031. So we're facing a lot of resistance to potentially increasing that residential code threshold to 10, but we're still trying to move the ball forward and at least have HCD start the work of putting together the materials that would be needed to eventually have this take effect. So of course we would like to be able to increase the code threshold immediately, but right now that's remaining a study bill, and we've learned some lessons from previous studies bills that have gone wrong, and so hopefully that'll help to move the ball forward a little bit. As far as the revitalizing struggling downtowns, this was announced earlier this week, and we're actually having a press conference in San Diego if anyone's local to San Diego. We're working with Assemblymember Haney, who's the chair of the Assembly Housing Committee on AB 2074. And essentially what this would do is it would require the largest cities in California to designate downtown regional transit hubs, in which case high-rise residential would be permitted as of right. There's an affordability component and a labor component. We're co-sponsoring this with the building trades, which I think is really exciting and represents progress on coalition politics in the building. If you know, historically we've butt head with the trades, but we came together and wanted to figure out what can we work on together. Where are the areas of agreement? And so this is this reflects some of that work that's been done. Of course, this is partly a housing bill. That's what's motivating to us, but it's also a downtown revitalization bill. It's also a bill to get union workers building projects that they are naturally building, which is the type 1 high-rise construction in a macro environment where many of those workers are out of work. So we're really excited about that. The key provision there is we're also requesting a revolving loan fund. So if you know anything about conditions, it's pretty hard to make those projects pencil. And when we were doing the math, we found that we need some sort of state backing to make these projects work. And so we're pushing for a $500 million revolving loan fund that will help those projects pencil and hopefully get projects off the ground. That also passed out of Assembly Housing yesterday, so very exciting. A few more bills here that are kind of smaller and grab bag, but nonetheless very important. So SB 1216, working on with Senator Christopher Caballero. This is the Housing Leadership Designation Bill. You know, one of the bits of pushback that we get from cities, and in many cases cities that are actually doing a really great job on building a lot of housing, is why is the state constantly coming in and making us do things? Why do we have to do these large, really complex housing elements if we are building housing? And you know, of course, I think for much of the state has to come in to put guardrails and to make sure that cities don't abuse these powers. But what the Housing Leadership Designation will do is say, hey, if you are permitting housing at a reasonable threshold based on the nature of the local affordability crisis, we are going to give you a little bit of extra flexibility on implementation and on enforcement. And it's going to be amended in future sessions, but the idea here is to finally give cities an incentive for the first time really in California state housing law to not just put together good plans or not just to adopt policies, but actually build housing and then reward cities that are doing that. And I think that will hopefully help to be something that we can incorporate into future legislation to start to shift the discourse around a lot of this work and say, yeah, hey, if you're a good actor doing good work, we're going to put you on easy street. But if you're a city that's still failing to build housing, we're gonna hold you to the fire here. We are also co-sponsoring with Assembly Member Quirk Silva AB 956. So this is a pretty simple bill, but I think the force of it should be immediately obvious. This will allow a second detached ADU to be built on residential properties. So hopefully to continue to unlock the ADU revolution that's ongoing. And I think that's it. Let me check here. So yeah, just a small package of 12 bills. So of course, there are a few other things that we're monitoring. So you know, there's lots of, as in Los Angeles, here in Sacramento, there's a lot of chatter about transfer taxes and making sure that they're well designed and not having a deleterious effect on new construction. You know, this is the number one thing that everybody who builds in LA wants to talk about, and I take the point, and we've got to balance this. You know, I'm hopeful that the state can come up with standards for transfer taxes that protect well-designed, well-meaning transfer taxes while putting some guardrails around provisions that are potentially harmful. So we're following that, and then we're supporting probably a dozen or so more bills. We're working closely with our partners like Abundant Housing LA, Housing Action Coalition, YIMBY groups from across the state. So of course, you know, Assemblyman Wicks is also running a package on manufactured housing and modular housing, which we're of course very supportive of. We've got a lot of allies running a lot of other bills on homeownership. So this is really just the tip of the iceberg. It's our tip, but we're excited about it, and we're hoping to get more homeownership units created and further streamline state housing law and get the state building. You know, one other thing I'll add is we're playing a lot of defense this year. So there are a number of bills to try to roll back SB 79 before it's even had an opportunity to take effect. So we are monitoring that. You know, we're spending a lot of time working with cities and COGS to try to help them implement this. We're working with a lot of cities that are adopting local alternative plans, and I think are doing it in a good faith way. And so, you know, that's of course going to be a big thing that's going to draw a lot of attention, and especially for you local activists who are joining on. You know, that's one of the most important things you can be doing in the next few months is to go to those public hearings, stay plugged in with that process. You know, when Abundant Housing LA sends out an email blast saying, hey, there's going to be a discussion of a local alternative plan, you know, go out, be a good faith collaborative partner, and But speak your piece about the need for more transit-oriented housing. So with that, happy to stick around and take any questions and links in the chat, and I'll share my email as well if you've got questions, comments.
Thank you so much, Nolan, and appreciate the shout out for our work around 79 implementation. That is one of our biggest campaigns this year. So yes, please do pay attention to our calls to action. So let's go to questions. I see William's hand up, and we will address the questions in the chat as well. So let's hear from William Frankenfeld.
Hi. I live in Long Beach, and I'm especially concerned for AB 1740. And I was wondering, this is a question for both you and Nolan. Have you talked with the mayor of Long Beach and the city council? Because we have bicycle mobility plan, we have, the A line and other, Long Beach Transit provides high quality transit services. And like, I can see so many parts of Long Beach just like getting changed day and night if a bill like this passes. So, and then I following up on that, how is it going to affect oil drilling and redevelopment of commercial and industrial areas? I'm thinking a lot about like the Los Cerritos wetlands area and the plan to add housing in like the southeast.
Okay, good questions. So we have not talked. So I totally agree with you that Long Beach is an amazing candidate for this, right? It's one of the first places I think about in LA County, along with the city of Santa Monica, which is a co-sponsor in LA, of course. So we're really excited about what this can produce for Long Beach. I believe that there are conversations going on. City of Santa Monica has a lobbyist that's been having conversations with various cities, and I believe the author's office has as well. And I can't say off the top of my head whether Rex Richardson or the city have submitted a support letter yet, but I can look into that. Your second question, William, was about housing redevelopment on environmentally sensitive sites. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm specifically thinking about how there's within the coastal zone in Long Beach, there's oil drilling sites, there's a power plant, and honestly, like I don't even think these would necessarily be feasible for redeveloping into housing. I'm just asking more broadly about, like, for example, like the AES Alameda subdivision. Like, I'd love to see that turned into like warehousing. So how would AB 1740 affect something like that?
So it depends on what the zoning is.
Okay.
So basically, it switches the permitting authority from the coastal commission to the city. If they certify as an urban mobility community, then you take that permitting authority from the coastal commission to the city for a select group of types of projects.
My gosh.
One of those types of projects is zoning compliant housing.
Okay.
So if it's a zoning compliant housing project, depending on the site, then it could potentially be. Obviously, sensitive sites like that may not have the zoning necessary.
Yeah. Okay. That I love hearing that because obviously this is out of the scope of housing, but like the Belmont Pool saga, which I'm sure many people here have been following that. The blame hasn't been solely on the Coastal Commission, but they have been a major roadblock in rebuilding a public pool in what is the global, capital for aquatics. So that's great to hear. Thank you.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't have much to add except that California YIMBY submitted a support letter for AB 1740. I see there were amendments earlier this week. I've not read them, so I can't speak to where it's at right now. But we're generally very supportive of this.
Thank you, Nolan. Kevin Scott.
All right. Hey, thank you, Scott and Nolan. Good to see you guys. I also have a question about 1740. First of all, do you have any impression about whether City of LA would try to make itself be a UMC? I think that's what it was called. I'm hoping yes. And then the second part to that question would be, I'm wondering if you can go into more detail about what that actually means that the permitting authority would change. I work on a lot of projects in Venice, and there's a couple of things about it. You have two different areas. You've got the dual jurisdiction coastal zone and the single. The way it works in the single is you get your coastal development permit from the city, and then on appeal, it can go to the Coastal Commission. So in that way, coastal can really gum up the works. In the dual zone, you have to get one from both the city and from coastal. So I'm wondering, is 1740 applying to both areas? And in a single, would it potentially change that appeal authority at all?
So I believe that LA will take advantage of. LA is a little bit complicated because it has multiple coastal zones. So you would have to go through the process for each of the sub areas. But like in Venice, I think it wouldn't matter which one of those two areas you were just talking about, Kevin, in terms of the permitting. The permitting would all be for the city of LA. And it's pretty dramatic. I was talking to a development consultant about a project on a parking lot that never happened. It was right across the street from Google. I mean, talk about location, right? Happened to be industrially zoned. And anywhere else in the city of LA, that project would have allowed housing because mixed industrial does. But Coastal Commission has a blanket rule against housing in industrial areas and makes it really, really difficult, regardless of local zoning. Project never was even proposed. And that was going to be 100% affordable housing in Venice, which has been one of like ground zero for displacement because of, it's gentrified without any production at all, barely at all, to soak up the increased demand over the last number of decades. So that just gives you a flavor.
Okay. I appreciate it. I just wanted to follow up with, do you know anything about the appeals process? Because I think that's where so much of the Coastal Commission gets its power from, is that you can appeal to Coastal, and then Coastal can deny a project or take years to decide if they want to approve it.
I believe, I have to look into this closer, Kevin, but I believe that those appeals exist because the Coastal, even though you can have a local coastal program, there's still oversight from, and the agreement that that the Coastal Commission and the city come to, still keeps a lot of power for the Coastal Commission, right? So I'm pretty sure that under this new regime, that if you can certify as a urban mobility community, that permitting power would reside in the city. Not for all projects, but for the project types in the bill.
Sure. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? I know there were some concerns about single-stair in the chat. I can talk about that a bit. So I think that there's a bunch to unpack here, but I think that the first and most key point is that there is zero evidence that contemporary single-stair buildings are more dangerous than double stairway buildings. Zero. Some of the most reputable academic sources have studied this. There's an incredible review of the literature by Pew, which is a very an unbiased, very highly regarded research organization, and there is literally zero evidence. Obviously, we understand the concerns. We care about safety. We are also evidence-based. Why is that the case? Why are these buildings safe? Well, first of all, single-stair ordinances like Seattle's, which is kind of the gold standard, requires other safety measures to make these buildings really safe, right? So things like sprinklers and other things that actually increase the safety of the fire-safe walls. A few other things to remember. We're not dealing, we are, the counterfactual is not necessarily that we'll get just the same amount of developments, but in double stairwell buildings. The counterfactual is we'll get some double stairwell buildings where you can fit them because you generally need larger sites, and that's not always possible. And you'll get the lack of redevelopments. And you know what's really not safe from fire? Old buildings. Because they were built when there were much less robust fire safety standards in the building code. So that's really important to understand. Another really important thing to understand is that the ways in which these requirements dictate building typology and the effect that has on safety. In a world in which we can't build the kind of safe single-stair buildings you see all around the world that have excellent safety records, you have to meet demand. You have to amass land and build very, very large buildings, large footprint buildings. I'm talking about footprint, not necessarily height. What does that mean? That means you might be pretty far from a stairway, right? Imagine a mixed-use building, a block wide mixed-use building built around an interior courtyard with parking on the bottom and very long corridors to get to your stairwell. That actually, then those stairwells, those corridors can fill up with smoke real fast, right? Single stair typologies can be totally different. Imagine that whole block where it's one building, but instead of one building, it's like what you see in a place like the Netherlands. It's a number of buildings right next to each other with a courtyard in the middle, and with open space in the middle. And those are actually different buildings, each with firewalls on both sides. And if there's a fire in one of those buildings, the fire does not spread to the entire block. It is maintained in that one building. And on each floor of that one building, there aren't 100 apartments. There are 2 to 4. And they're all right next to the stairwell. So there's many reasons to be concerned about these large footprint projects and their safety, even if they might have 2 stairwells. So those are just a few of the reasons. But I think the most important is just that we don't have evidence that they're less safe. And Seattle has had its single stair ordinance since the late 1970s, I believe. It's produced many beautiful buildings and no safety problems.
I'd like to speak to that, Scott. I think your points are very well taken. There is significant concern amongst older adults and people with disabilities about the evacuation of buildings. That includes the availability of evacuation chairs, training on evacuation chairs, and that concern extends to the movement for single stair exits. There are certainly significant studies that have been done about safety, as you pointed out, that would seem to indicate that there is a potential for safety when it's part of a life safety environment. Sprinklers, warning sounds, warning buzzers, lights, et cetera, et cetera. I happen to be a member of the LA County Commission on Older Adults, and I'm not calling in that role. But we've had some discussions about this, and we had one member who particularly had to evacuate a building in Long Beach due to an emergency. And the fire department was literally trying to come up the stairs while people were trying to evacuate down the stairs. So I don't want to minimize the benefit of single stair. I also don't want to minimize the complexity of having a safe environment. And it may be that we can work together towards this effort, specifically if we can also emphasize the need for things like evacuation chairs and training on evacuation. So Scott,
happy to have that conversation, John. And I think that as you said rightly, these ordinances, they are paired with enhanced safety
yes.
Requirements, and so the sorts of enhancements that you're talking about may very well be able to be incorporated in either local building code amendments or in the statewide standards.
Yeah, sounds great. Sorry, Scott. Love to have that conversation. I will drop my email into the chat, and so we can catch up offline and carry this forward. I think it's a great discussion for us to have.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Do we have any further questions? Or if you put a question in the chat that was not heard, feel free to raise your hand and ask it to us verbally, or put it in the chat again. Laura.
Perfect, because I was just about to read out the question that she put in. Go for it, Laura.
Oh, okay. Let me just put my camera on. Yes, I had questions on what are your thoughts on AB 2741 that seeks to modify existing laws related to cities using overlay zones to get a compliant housing element. I know the cities of Redondo Beach and Hermosa Beach use that. And my concern is that they're going to use this to allow for substantial compliance when these sites aren't zoned for housing.
This is an excellent question. Are you familiar with this one, Nolan?
Yeah, I don't know that we've taken an official position on it yet, but we have significant concerns, I think, for the same reason that you do, Laura.
Okay. Yes.
I'll put it on our list to look into.
And considering that this is sponsored by Elmer Tucci, who's my representative, I wanted to make sure that it was on your radar, because if we need to put some pressure to kind of look into this, please let me know.
Yeah, I mean, I think as many people on the call know, cities have been using overlays and bonuses as a way to try to stop actually having to do the underlying rezoning. That's the whole point of RHNA. And so conceptually, we have significant concerns about it, but we'll explore our options before we take a position here. But thank you for flagging it.
Kim, go for it.
Hey, it's Kim Rader. I had a quick question. I was wondering if either Scott or Nolan could talk about the missing middle. And I understand what it is, but I struggle explaining the missing middle to people that understand that there's big problems in the economy, but aren't as educated as we all are on different bills and different things that are going on in the economy, and particularly because I talk to a lot of younger people, how to explain it to younger people that don't remember when there was a middle class. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the term is used in different ways. I mean, the classic way that in the housing context, missing middle, I think its use is expanded, but the root of the term is about housing typologies.
Okay.
Right. It was actually termed by an urbanist, and the idea is it's those typologies that sit between single-family homes and mid-rise construction that used to form like a huge proportion of the housing stock in American cities. Right. So think about and every city has its own special typologies, right? Boston has the triple deckers.
Yeah.
Here in
Yeah.
Los Angeles, we invented the bungalow core. There's duplexes and six stacks in Chicago and all of the stuff, but they tend to be 1 to 3 story typologies, and usually like less than 10 units. And I think they are a typology that provided natural affordability in the past, right? I mean, we tend to be very focused on mixed income and inclusionary zoning and deed restriction and stuff as tools to create mixed income communities. But the more traditional tool for that was building different typologies that would work for different sorts of people.
Right.
And I think missing middle typologies tend to be attractive for families, for folks that have less money. So many of these typologies can fit open space in more easily than larger typologies, so you can have a bit of private open space. But there are barriers to its production. One of them is the one that Nolan talked about, which is that the building code can be very restrictive and very expensive for these typologies, right? You could have a McMansion, of the type that we see in Los Angeles, that is subject to the residential code, and then you could have, a fourplex that has the same basic massing, but is subject to much more restrictive codes and they can add substantial cost. I know that the Turner Center up north did a study a number of years ago that showed that it was at least a 10% increase in cost because of those more robust and probably unnecessary building codes. So that's one thing that makes it hard to build those kinds of typologies. There are other barriers too, like parking requirements and zoning and much more. But this bill that Nolan talked about is certainly something from Assembly Member Ward that Abundant Housing is very excited about as well.
Okay, there's not really a link when people talk about missing middle in the economy as the missing middle class and the missing middle in housing. The missing middle in housing is specific to the type.
I think there is a link because I think these are typologies that work well for middle class people often, and I think that's what I think of it. Started to sort of see an expansion of the way people use this term to talk about economic class as well. I think there is a link.
Yeah. I get questions on it because I talk to a lot of people and they're really interested because I'm the older part of Gen X and they want to know what it was like in the 70s and the 80s and 90s when, one, things were different, but also the economy was a lot different. So there's a lot of people that are well into their adult life that don't really know what it was like when there was a big middle class,
Yeah.
So it's two different conversations that relate.
Yeah, they are related.
Okay.
I think we could help grow the middle class if we could build housing typologies that work for the middle class.
Okay.
Thank you, Kim.
Thanks.
William.
It's interesting actually because my question is also related to the same bill, and I'm kind of flipping it the other way around. So I'm a younger person asking more about elderly. I read an article from the San Francisco Gate yesterday about how a lot of older homeowners in California are stuck in their oversized homes. And I see ADUs and missing middle homes built on like their land as a way to allow them to stay in their communities and stay in their neighborhoods. But, obviously a aging couple doesn't need a 3-bedroom home anymore. And that would allow, them to stay in their communities while then maybe like renting their front house out to a family that actually needs, a 3 or 4-bedroom home. So are there any attempts to frame this as like a senior housing like issue as well as like starter homes to help say like, a 30-something build equity to buy a bigger house?
Yeah, I mean, homeowners can do this today. They can use the JADU provisions to subdivide within their home, and probably one of our number one allies on this has been AARP for exactly this reason. So yeah, that's central to our framing, and and we find like it's a salient with legislators, and it's a real issue.
That's interesting. AARP's involved because it's so important. That's what my age group is really dealing with now, the downsizing. You know, very cool they're involved.
And also that missing middle allows a level of density that supports retail that is then walkable, right? Because if you get older, you might not be able to drive to these kind of places.
Yeah, yeah. Well, my downsizing came through homelessness, but other people that I know are really going through this in a little bit healthier way. Also, the AARP might be involved too in getting people on lower floors. That's a big problem. Anyways,
All right. Well, I think we want to respect everyone's time since was this just a lunch and learn. But thank you everyone for attending. Thank you, Scott and Nolan, for helping us work out all of this complex stuff. I just reminding everyone that I will be sending a follow-up email that has the recording. I think we used slides for Scott, and then I will go ahead and send the links to the California YIMBY stuff as well. So thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your special lunch today, and I hope you have a wonderful end of your weekend. Nolan,
Can I make a quick plug? So if you're really passionate about anything that was discussed today, YIMBY Lobby Day is coming up. I'm going to share the link. Essentially what this is we bring dozens, in previous sessions, I think we've had over 100, 200 people come up. So come up, you'll get briefed, you'll get put in a group, you'll go meet with your legislator, with a California YIMBY or Abundant Housing LA or another YIMBY state legislative rep, and you'll be able to advocate in the most effective way. And then we have a big fun happy hour at the end of the day. So I strongly encourage people. That's going to be on May 19th. And if paying to get up is a concern, obviously it's if you can get yourself up, that helps us to spend more money on advocacy. But if there's a financial barrier, we also have financial support for folks who need it. We want to make sure that everybody can come up and spread the pro housing gospel. So I'd love to see you all there. And thank you.
It's a lot of fun, guys. It's kind of like the big, the biggest event for our movement statewide of the year. So you get to come be a part of